Hi, fifth grade. Are you ready for some social studies? For today, I'm just going to kind of go over the whole week's worth of lessons, and then you can kind of follow along in your book as you go. And to do something a little different, since we're online now, instead of doing those pages like we normally do, that's fine if you want to do that to check your learning. You should still take your notes like we normally do in class. And then I am going to have you do a section on IXL because we now have access to social studies, science, and math on IXL. So I looked at the social studies section, and there's a section on the Louisiana Purchase and the War of 1812, which is what we're going to be talking about here in this chapter. So I am going to have you do your assessment portion on there. So that's what I'm going to be grading, is that part on IXL. So anyway, if you have your book handy, if you can open it to 342, you'll see we're going to start chapter 10, which is the early republic. Some of the words we're going to cover are canal, which is a waterway that's going to make things easier for the ships to get through to places. We're going to talk about the Erie Canal, which connected the Great Lakes to the Hudson River. We're going to talk about a corps. It's spelled C-O-R-P-S, but it's pronounced corps. And it's a team of people who work together. So that's going to talk about all the people that went along with Lewis and Clark to explore the new territory that we're about to purchase. The prosperity. Prosperity has to do with people kind of making quite a bit of money and doing really well in the economy and that kind of stuff. So it's that has to do with after the War of 1812, which we'll get to. And a campaign, which we've seen a lot of here recently, being an election year. So a campaign is basically telling what an elected official is going to do for the people who vote for them. So right now, like I said, we're seeing that especially with the Democrats, since we already have our president is the Republican candidate. So with the Democratic nominees, we've been seeing their campaigns telling what they would do. We're going to talk about Andrew Jackson's campaign before he was elected president. Okay? And you can look at the chapter timeline too to see kind of the years we're covering. We're starting at 1769 and going all the way to 1838 to the Trail of Tears, which I know some of you have been asking me about, so I'm sure you're excited to finally learn about that. So on page 344, we're going to talk about moving across the frontier. And I'll just go ahead and read this to you, and you can kind of decide what you want to take notes on. Remember, the yellow highlighted words are the vocabulary words for the chapter, so those are always important to take notes on. And the names in bold are always good to take notes on. You want to get about one note per paragraph so that you can get that understanding. And really continue to write it down in your journal, because that physical writing it down will help your brain remember the information better. So I'm going to read, and you can follow along with me. So it says, have you ever taken a ride in a wagon or on a horse? In the late 1700s and early 1800s, people walked, rode horses, or traveled in wagons over bumpy roads. What is different about travel today? And you know there's lots of differences now. So exploring the frontier. The first colonists who came to the British colonies from Europe settled between the Atlantic Ocean and the Appalachian Mountains. This 2,000-mile-long chain of mountains was difficult to cross. Under the proclamation of 1763, it was against the law for colonists to settle American Indian lands west of the Appalachians. Yet people did not stop trying to cross these mountains. As land in the east filled with farms and towns, settlers looked for new ways to cross the Appalachians. So we talked in the last chapter how it wasn't really fair that the colonists were fighting in the war, and then Britain still let the American Indians keep that land that they were fighting over. So they weren't able to move over there yet. That's what that proclamation of 1763 had said. All right, I'm on 345 now. And we're going to talk about Daniel Boone, who you may have heard of before. So Daniel Boone, a hunter and pioneer, had heard stories about the land west of the Appalachian Mountains. A pioneer is one of the first of a group of people to enter or settle a region. In 1769, Boone and several other men followed an American Indian trail through a narrow passage in the Appalachians in Virginia. On the other side of the Cumberland Gap, as this passage was called, they found a land where American Indians farmed and hunted. Boone wanted to live on this land too. Okay, so Daniel Boone is a very well-known pioneer, so he wanted to see what was on the other side of the Appalachians. Boone helped clear a new road through the Cumberland Gap. The route through the mountains was called the Wilderness Road. It stretched 200 miles west. Boone guided families, including his own wife and children, across the Appalachians. Settlers started towns such as Harrodsburg and Boonesboro in present-day Kentucky. So you'll want to remember what the Cumberland Gap is. That's how they were able to get through the Appalachians. Okay. And then life on the frontier. By the late 1700s, thousands of people had crossed the Appalachians. They looked for good, inexpensive farmland and new opportunities in the Ohio and Mississippi River valleys. Remember that Ohio River Valley was one we talked about before that had really good farmland, and everybody really wanted to own that land. As settlers went west, they moved into a region known as the frontier. A frontier is the edge of a country or settled region. The frontier and the land beyond it was already settled by American Indians. Shawnee, Choctaw, Cherokee, and other American Indian nations built villages, farmed, and hunted between the Appalachians and the Mississippi River. So it was not completely empty. There's American Indians there. Indians and settlers fought over this land on the frontier, but they also borrowed ideas and customs from one another. Okay, so we're talking about all that land between the Appalachian Mountains and the Mississippi River. So you can kind of see at the bottom of page 345, it shows you where the Cumberland Gap is in the Appalachian Mountains. It shows you the Wilderness Road, and it shows you kind of the area that they were fighting over with the American Indians too. Okay, so that was the first lesson, and I'm going to post another video so that I can break it up into chunks for you so you're not reading through the entire chapter in one sitting. So take your time just like we would normally do in the classroom. Take it 2 pages at a time and allow your brain to kind of absorb the information. And then I will post the IXL section that you need to do that goes along with each section we cover. All right?